Welcome to today's talk, where we're talking about how COVID has impacted tutoring and how children are learning these days. My name is Regina DeMeo. I'm a family law attorney in Maryland and DC, and I've been practicing for over 20 years. And with me today, I have Pavel Sahovic of Potomac Tutoring. And I'm so happy that you're here today. Thanks for taking the time to be here.
Thank you.
So how long has Potomac Oak Tutoring been around?
We're going to be going on our 8th year starting on October 1st. So starting, I think, today. We've been now in business for 7 years, and this will be our 8th year of business.
Wow. Well, I've heard great things, and my son has had the pleasure of using you guys, so I can only say wonderful things about you. But a lot of people, parents, are curious, how has COVID impacted the way that tutoring sessions are actually handled?
Right. It's been a little bit of a change. As you know, before COVID struck, we've really been doing only in-person sessions, and then once the schools went online, we try to follow MCPS policy as much as possible. So we've also now gone online. So all of our sessions, both private and group sessions, are now online, and I think it benefits some students, for example, but I think also for some students it is a little tougher to do the sessions online. So just kind of depends on the student, but yeah, everything's now online for us.
And now that school is back in session, mostly online, have you seen an increase in inquiries about tutoring?
Right, so I think that's one of the most interesting things that we are looking at, is that after COVID struck in about March, when schools went online, we saw a pretty huge drop off in how many students were looking for academic tutoring. And I think that was in part because for MCPS students in particular, the grading system was relaxed. So they were just trying to, get by and get to the end of the semester. So we saw a pretty huge drop. Not a lot of students continued with academic tutoring once the schools went online. Now that schools opened back, once schools opened virtually now, we are seeing more students starting to, start academic tutoring back up, but I wouldn't say that it's to the same level that we saw before COVID. And I think that's partially because I think the teachers are still probably being a little lenient with the virtual sessions, and I think that there's not as much instruction. So as a result, we're not expecting to get back to the same level that we were before, but we are seeing an uptick now that we're about a month in of students who need academic help, and we see students starting back up. So it's slowly starting to come back, but not at the same levels as before.
So what about like kids that are studying for the SAT or ACT? Because you normally help with that, and I have no idea what's even going on with those tests right now.
Right. So yeah, that has been a big source of frustration for a lot of our students and families. As you may know, the test started getting canceled in around March of last school year or this year, and what we saw is that once the test got canceled, and a lot of times they would cancel them sometimes even a few days before the test was supposed to be held. So we'd have students who are prepping. They might have put in a month or two of prep leading up to their first test sometimes, and then that test would get canceled, and then they would hope to take the very next one, and then that test would get canceled. So we had actually a few students that never got a chance to take the test, and finally maybe right around now they're getting a chance as rising seniors to take their first test. Some are going as far as Kentucky. We had a student a few weeks ago that went as far as Kentucky to try to get a test in because of all the cancellations going on. We have been advising students that if they really want to take the test, to look for locations that are less likely to get canceled. I think the schools, for example, are a little bit more likely to cancel the test, but maybe going outside of Montgomery County is a little bit less likely. So I think it's tough. On the other hand, though, I think as far as test prep goes, it's also, I think, important to make a plan moving forward. For example, I think that a lot of colleges have gone test optional now. So it kind of depends also on what colleges students are applying to.
You guys usually also have like debate club. Is that still going on?
Yeah. So actually, interestingly enough, that is one of the services that we're seeing a lot of demand for. And to be fair, it's partially because in the past, all of our debate classes were held in person. But once we switched to online, it allowed us to basically, allow anybody to join debate around the country. And I think in part because parents might be looking for their kids to get involved in things in extracurricular activities. And debate is a pretty interactive activity where you're not just kind of looking at the computer screen, but you're also talking, and you're also taking notes and doing some research. So we're seeing a pretty big, I guess, interest, a lot of interest in debate. So that's been one of the things that was a little bit interesting to see, because we weren't sure exactly what would happen, but it seems like more and more students are interested in debate, not just in this area, but also around the country. So we're hoping that continues, even after COVID.
Well, debate is great. I mean, especially, as a practicing lawyer, I was really happy that I did that when I was in high school.
Mhm.
And even in college, I did Model UN, and the skill was great. Being able to debate is something that is useful for anybody, I think.
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, we're really proud of our debate team, and I completely agree. I mean, when we look at the studies that are conducted about debate, we see that not only does debate help students with public speaking skills and logical reasoning skills, it also boosts their confidence. I think once they're more comfortable speaking, you can see their self-esteem rise. But also from a more, I guess, college applications oriented approach, we also see studies show that debate increases, test scores, and debaters have an average higher GPAs and have actually better college admission outcomes. So we're big fans of debate, and we're seeing a lot of students, over the years really kind of find themselves through debate and find their voice. So yeah, it's something that I would encourage anybody to try, whether with us or with with someone else.
That's fantastic. So I think the only other service we haven't covered is you guys also do college counseling, right? And how has that been impacted with COVID?
Yeah, no, that has definitely, the landscape of college admissions has definitely changed with COVID. So what we saw fairly early on is that schools started to consider going, as I mentioned, test optional. And I think that was a big question mark for a lot of parents. Like, what does that mean? Do I have to take the test or not? And I think that what we're learning right now is that most schools for this admission cycle have gone test optional. There have been some schools that were a little hesitant about doing so. I think College Park, University of Maryland, was one of the schools that was a little hesitant about, for example, going test optional. So we don't know if next admission cycle they're going to continue to be test optional. But also, I'd probably add to that test optional is not necessarily test blind. So test optional is when students can submit their applications without having a test score attached. But at the same time, if they are able to take a test, they can submit those scores in addition to their application. And everything being equal, I think colleges would prefer to see, a solid test score in addition to the application. They may not use that against students, but I do think it's a little bit of a bonus right now. But at the same time, it also kind of changes the landscape in the sense that by eliminating the testing requirement, I think a lot of students who, for example, might be doing well in school, but might not be as good of test takers, and maybe they have great extracurriculars, I think, for example, this is, a great year for them to apply. On the other hand, you may have a reverse where maybe a student is not doing as well in school, but they've traditionally maybe been a good test taker. And if they just can't find a testing location to administer that test, then, that might decrease their chances a bit. And they have to find another way of kind of, showing, why colleges should admit them. So I think, yeah, it's definitely been a bit of a curveball for all our parents. But I think that's one of the reasons why I think college consulting really hasn't been affected too much, because I think now parents are looking to see how they can, for example, frame their extracurriculars to put their best foot forward for their kids. And for example, if they need help, figuring out what their students need to be writing about in those college application essays, because now more so than ever, with the testing requirement being eliminated for a lot of colleges are looking at those other factors like extracurriculars, essays, grades. So everything starts to matter a little bit more. So yeah, I think it is an interesting year to be applying to college. A lot of students are also taking gap years, which is also a bit of a curveball.
Wow. So I'm not sure if I've covered everything. Is any final tips you want to give to families that are trying to navigate this whole process during COVID?
Yeah, I would say that maybe just a couple of tips. I would say that with everything kind of being up in the air right now, not knowing our college is going to be going into doing test optional again next admission cycle. Are the tests going to be finally held? This is the first month that I think Montgomery County is finally starting to hold these tests at public high schools. I think the most important thing is to create a plan and have basically contingencies if things go in a different direction than what you would expect. So for example, maybe a student is looking at some schools. Well, it'll be a good idea to keep an eye on what the school's testing policies might be. Are they planning on going testing optional? The University of California system, as you may know, basically has now eliminated the SAT and ACT requirement, and they plan on not really bringing it back. So if you're planning on going on the West Coast, you may not need to worry about the SAT or ACT as much. On the other hand, for example, if you're planning on trying to get into Maryland, that might be a school that might bring that back sooner rather than later. And with creating a plan, I think it all kind of starts with getting a sense of where students are at. So maybe sitting down with somebody and talking about, okay, is my testing where it needs to be? Should I be focusing more on that? Should I be focusing more on grades? Or should I be, for example, focusing more on extracurricular activities and something like debate or something else? As you may know, because of the relaxed grading policies, grades are now across the board in many schools higher than ever. Churchill's average accepted GPA into University of Maryland College Park is going to be a 4.6 soon, which is a big difference from what it was a few years ago. Well, a few years ago, it was usually about a 4.2, 4.3. So I think it's important to kind of also keep an eye on the ball when it comes to academics, but at the same time, make a plan forward and have, as I mentioned, different options depending on where COVID leads us.
That's great advice. So if people want to contact you for further information about your services, what's the best way to do that?
Okay, so they're always welcome to find us on our website, PotomacTutoring.com or PotomacOakTutoring.com, whatever they prefer. Also, just give us a call, 240-221-1661, or they can email me directly, Pavel, Pavel at PotomacTutoring.com, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that prospective students might have.
Wow, this has been great. Thanks so much for taking the time to do this, Pavel.
Great, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.